This is a continuation of the previous video where a phone call I wanted to take had me end it at the reading of Revelation 16:3, where it says, "And the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became as the blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea." And every living soul died in the sea. Now, that's very interesting because, what souls are in the sea? Now, the sea, actually, when you get the translation of it, well, I said I wasn't going to go through Revelation chapter 16 and the four vials, but right now, because there's a lot to this, and I do want to get back to Revelation 12 and to make some headway on moving through that rest of that chapter. So I'm not going to go into dissecting this right now, so I'm going to stop there. But there's also the next verse, Revelation 16:4, "And the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and the fountains of water, and they became blood." So, so these things are yet to come. And now, what sea was this they're talking about? Like I said, I'm not going to talk about it right now. Blah, blah, blah. I can't stop myself, Once I, see it, I want to go for it. But I want to get back to Revelation 12. So, I'll do that. And to 10, where we were before, and I was saying how this is interesting, Revelation 12:12, where it says, "Rejoice, and ye that dwell in them, ye heavens, woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea." See, interesting that it's talking about inhabitants of the earth and the sea. "For the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time." So, and it's not the only place, it's not the only two places that talk about the sea as if they're souls that live in the sea. So, who are those souls that are living in the sea? Or inhabiting the sea? Well, I guess you could have underwater bases. Perhaps the Luciferian space aliens have an entrance underneath the sea. Perhaps Antarctica is considered being an ice, a part of it being covered with ice. That's the sea, because what's frozen is the ice, and it's. But I guess that's fresh water, right? I guess from rain. Is that the way the ice actually forms? I guess so. I must admit, that's a little bit of a puzzle for me right now to think about. But what other, there could be humans with submarines under the sea, or under the sea could be also under the ground under the sea as a possibility. But then that might be awful hard to try to, have a base somewhere under there with all that pressure of the sea. And I don't know, but there's inhabitants in the sea. We have to know that, because otherwise they wouldn't have said it that way. He's talking about the devil being under there, so he's talking about the Luciferians there under the sea. No, he's talking about those that dwell in that, well, to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. Sorry, getting confused there. But so anyway, so when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman, which brought forth the man. And the persecution of the woman is what I wanted to focus on now a little bit. Oh, you know what? What I didn't do before, I didn't go back here. Where the okay. Oh yeah, Revelation 12:9. And the great dragon was cast down, the old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. I guess it was way in this other part, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, okay, to devour the child as soon as he was born. And that, so when was Doe born is what I was talking about before. What was the adversity that he had to go through where he was devoured down? And where Lucifer was eating down Doe. In this case, because we're talking about the end times, of course. And right before he was born, and I think officially it could be said that he was born to his next, he's not born like from a baby. That birth, it's not a birth like that, it's more like a promotion birth. Being born to become a captain, or even higher than that. Like if there was, if you're going to describe them in military terms, where T was an admiral, according to Doe, in those terms. So what was the attack? Well, when they got arrested and he went to jail, that was part of it. Okay. At least one phase of the attack of Doe, and it was in prison when he actually, for 6 months, where he actually wrote Statement 1. So that Statement 1 was like the first, his first solidified birth, and then the second part of that solidified birth, I think, was when I guess it was like, these are awakenings. These are when Doe actually was speaking publicly, and he was the primary speaker with T, and that's when he was also attacked big time. Okay, seeking to devour him as soon as he was born. Because as soon as means in the process of his being born. Because the next level doesn't have like one day. Well, After I say that, I think, well, when they graduated, there was like a day that they all laid down their lives, and so that was a time where the graduation was down to the day. Okay, but otherwise, it's always a period of time that leads up to that final day. That would be considered the graduation or the birth. So Doe had many births up until that point. Every time he had a problem with tea, he was being eaten down by the Luciferian, by Lucifer, to where he had to overcome that. So every doubt he had along the way was the process of his being born. So I'm not gonna go through this before, because I went through this pretty much in the previous videos. But then I get to I've gone through 10, and I've gone through 11, I think. And I guess because Doe was born and kept on going and stuck with it, that was the failure. That was the final failure of Lucifer. And so trying to stop Doe was the straw that broke the camel's back, if you want to put it that way, that solidified Lucifer's being cast to the earth for good, to not ever be able to be in the heavens again. I don't know, how much of the heavens they were able to be in before that, but at this point, and I don't know if Earth also, well, I won't say any more than that. But this is where it talks about in Revelation 12:13, talks about persecuting the woman. Let me put that water back over there. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman, which brought forth the man-child, the man. Didn't say child in the manuscript, so it was put in italics. And man actually says male, man-child. Okay, so I guess that was well, it's just saying the ways it was interpreted. It doesn't necessarily mean that. I guess male is the best, the clearest translation of that word there. So, even though, I don't know if that's really the clearest, because when he was born, he wasn't a male anymore, even though his vehicle was a male. So, I can get, twisting it, breaking, whatever you call it, casting straws, or whatever you call that, with the semantics here on that. So it's not important, but I don't think. But the persecution of the woman, let me get down here. I should have been down here before. Okay. And when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman. Okay, now persecuted comes from, well, let me switch my screen so you can see this. Comes from the word to flee. To flee and to pursue. So, causing the woman to flee and is causing a pursuit of the woman. Which brought forth the man. Okay, and here's a better definition of the Greek word harem, I'm not sure how to say that in the Greek, as a male, related to stronger for lifting. But it's related to arrow also, so that's, which is to lift up, to raise up. So it's persecuting the one who is being lifted up, or to raised up. The male that was being lifted up, or born up, carried up, lifted up, loosed up, made to doubt. Well, I don't think that, so a lot of times it means the opposite in many ways. A lot of the Greek words have an opposite kind of meaning with them, but which is based on the context. So in this context, I don't think made to doubt fits here. That the woman was bringing forth a man-child made to doubt child. Doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can make sense out of it. I can, but I'm not saying it's accurate. But in fact, if you're the vehicle that Doe took, T said, was prepared to be a vehicle that required a lot of overcoming. In other words, had to overcome all the equivalent things the student body would have to overcome, so that he could actually lead them through that overcoming. And so that even goes to the fact that Doe's vehicle became inclined to attraction to the same gender, the same male vehicle, what's called homosexuals or gay or LGBTQ in today's terminology. So the fact that he had a vehicle that had to overcome that made it so that any of the students that were so inclined wouldn't have to deal with, or would know how to deal with it. And what Doe said about those students was, there were a number of them, male and female, and what he said to those students, which I only know about the male ones really, but I think there was a female or two that were inclined towards attracted to the same sex as their vehicles. But he said about those individuals that were attracted to same-sex vehicles, same gender vehicles, was that they had overcome their gender consciousness before that, but they still didn't necessarily had overcome their sexual consciousness or sexual desires. So that was still left to be done for some of those individuals. But not necessarily all of them, because everybody in the classroom didn't have to overcome their sexuality in this lifetime, I don't think. And I had some indications of that. Like, for instance, Lagodi told me that he had no desire for sexuality. When I was his partner, he told me that. So, because his vehicle is older, well, not necessarily. Because when my vehicle was his age, I had desire for sexuality. When his vehicle was in the late 40s, when he joined, and early 50s. I'm not sure exactly how old he was at the time. But I don't think he was older than Doe, but he might have been. So the dragon's after the woman and is persecuting the woman, okay, in this verse here. So then what happens is the woman is given 2 wings of a great eagle. Now, what's the form of the persecution, though? How is that happening? It's happening in the spirit world, of course. It's in the world of thoughts, and thoughts that can have feelings associated with them. Okay, I can imagine that could be thoughts that would be. Well, I know that those thoughts were from the families, because what T had us do was visit the families to calm the anxiety down. But she didn't say she was doing that for us. I mean, for her. She said she was doing it for us so that we didn't have that anxiety to deal with. And it was for them too, for those family members, because she didn't want them to go through that, having that anxiety. It all happened together. She was not void of being affected by that constant negativity, because all those humans that knew that their loved ones joined, the Luciferians had a way of, sending those thoughts and those feelings to T. I'm not sure how that happened, but that's what they're giving the indication of here. And so that it actually consumed a T's vehicle, even though it didn't say it that way. It's just that it's persecuted. But then what happened was that the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle in Revelation 12:14, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, times, and a half a time from the face of the serpent. Well, that was about 1982. And when we were in Blackhawk, and you can actually look at the date of the Blackhawk tape, and I believe it was 1982, I don't remember what month it was, but close enough, because times, and half a time means well, it can mean whatever it needs to mean, but it's just like 3 days and a half, because time is one time, could be like 1 year, and then times could be like 2 years, and then half of a time would be like half a year. So there where you have 3.5 years. At least that's one way I'm thinking about it, because I'm trying to make it fit. I agree. I'm trying to make it fit to what took place. But I only saw this after the fact, of course, because none of this can be imagined. I can't imagine how anybody could imagine this. But so that's how I came up with how Blackhawk have to do with the wings of a great. The eagle is not necessarily just an eagle, but it's also from its wind-like flight, an eagle. But it stems from being in the air, being. But it actually means eagle as a flying bird. But that's also translated in other ways. I'm going to look at here as wings is from the Greek word pterux, which means a feather. See, Strong's isn't the only way of getting information about the meaning of Greek and Hebrew words. There's also, oh gosh, I forgot the name of that other book now, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But there are several sources of that information, and so I use everything I can get. But so it's mean that word 4072 comes from, which they're saying is a derivative of this word 4420, means a feather as a noun. and it could just mean in general birds also. So calling it a black hawk, where hawks also, I think, live in caves in mountaintops. In fact, where I live is a mountain, and it's only about 900 feet tall, but it's got a rock face on it, and there's a kind of a hawk that flies there. And I actually climbed to the top of it a few times, which isn't too difficult of a climb, and to where the hawks were hovering. These were black hawks, actually. And I didn't think they were hawks. I thought they were ravens. But somebody that knows the area really well and hiked up in these mountains a lot said they were hawks. So I'm not, dispute that. But they were, I would be looking down on them hovering, because they would catch the draft coming off the rocks, and they could just stay in one spot. They weren't even flapping their wings at all. And so when I realized that Tian-Do rented a house that was like close to 10,000 feet up in elevation, up the Coal Creek Canyon, not Coal Creek Canyon, the Coal River Canyon maybe it was, or Coal Canyon, I think it was called. Might have been Coal Creek Canyon, over there near Denver, which is the canyon south of Boulder Canyon. I think it's the only other canyon, big canyon, that's there. There may be other ones in between them too. But this is a big one, and a lot of people live up that canyon. And one town up there is called Blackhawk. And it's a mining town, but it's no longer used as a mining town, and there's a lot of artsy people that live in that canyon area. And I understand. And so Tian-Do rented a house, and they made that house into a retreat. And interesting, they're calling it a retreat. So the woman, I just realized that. The woman was great. She could fly to escape from the face of the serpent. And maybe that's get out of the vibration of where we were before that in Texas, in the city areas. Because it was known that Tian-Do thought that the higher elevations were less and less of the vibration, the human vibration. And Do even referred to one of the Psalms, maybe it was Psalm 93, that talked about the elevated areas as being the mountains of, where God dwells. And you can see the New Jerusalem was seen by John in his visions, or the dreams, whatever he was given, to write all this down. He was taken up to a high mountain, and that's where he saw the New Jerusalem. So the New Jerusalem appears to be a spacecraft that is half the size of the United States, like from the Mississippi River over, and like 1,360 miles square, or round, or some shape or form. It doesn't have to be necessarily in the other shapes, but it's described as being the same on all sides. So that could mean, if you make it round, it could be on all four sides. It could have four sides, the four winds, or four different quarters of the earth. And the fourth quarter being, I believe, the United States, and South, or the North American quarter, as opposed to the South American quarter, which would be the third quarter. And Europe would be another form of that quarter, and of that Europe and Asia, I guess. Because it also indicated, well, I'm not going to go there right now. So anyway, so that's where I was thinking that T was getting a breather, although her body was damaged by that persecution. And that's what resulted in cancer in her eye in which she had removed in approximately 1983, sorry, about 2 years before she left her vehicle. And her eye was removed, and the doctor at that time told her that she had cancer throughout her body. But she rejected that doctor saying that, and said that that wasn't right. Told him that wasn't right for him to say that without evidence. Because just because it was in the eye didn't necessarily mean that it was in the liver or throughout the whole body at that point. But it's interesting that it was her eye that was, and the eye is the light of the body, right? So, and the lamp of the body. But it's also, when you make your eye single, your whole body is full of light. So it's the receiver of the light. If your whole body is going to be filled with it, when you make your eye single, then if that light has some darkness in it, is coming through that channel, negativity, then it's going to have its effect on the vehicle, a negative effect on the vehicle. But it's not a negative effect on the member of the next level, because it just means that their vehicle is going to die from it. And then they're going to go on to their next task, because that task is over. So they plan for that to happen right from the beginning. And T would always say that she came just to get Doe going, and Doe didn't know what she meant by that. And then she said she was going back after that. But they always thought that they were leaving together until then, until that happened. But that served them, because then that provided a test for the students who believed that they were going to be leaving together, whether that was going to change their commitment, their covenant with T and Doe, because she left ahead of him. And she left by a way that they didn't think they were going to leave at first. So all those things become tests. But those that have the bond, that have formed enough of a bond with them, weren't going to be challenged by those tests that much, if at all. I don't know if that's the reason why I wasn't challenged by those tests, whether I had enough of that bond in me, in my vehicle, with my soul, body. I don't know. But maybe it didn't affect me because I didn't have enough of a bond. But I didn't have that problem of doubting, that much, in that way. So, but perhaps my vehicle and soul did have that bond with them, and I fell. So I'm another fallen angel. But once fallen, like Tiendo said in the Blackhawk tapes, Lucifer was given many opportunities. And so anybody that's fallen still has the opportunity to recoup. So it can't be assumed that I'm recouping, but I know I want to recoup. So I think I'll be afforded that opportunity, and it's a matter of whether I can pass my future tests. And I know there's going to be some future major tests before I lose this vehicle. So well, I shouldn't say I know that, but because I could be wrong about that. But then saying, but that didn't stop the serpent from continuing to come after the woman. Revelation 12:15. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman. And there again you have the humans being represented by the water. So that's the literal interpretation. And it's or the thoughts of the humans, the same thing. The mind, the misinformation mind from the humans. And no, actually, what he's saying is the serpent is casting out of his mouth. The human behaviors and ways, I guess, and concerns of the humans, and the human thinking and human misinformation, like I said there. I think that's true. But it's coming out of the serpent's mouth. So the serpent, in this context, which I didn't move the screen up to see this properly. The mouth is a gash in the face, by implication the language. Okay, the edge. So it's the serpent's casting his edge, his face, his language, his thoughts, his vibrations. Let's see if this Greek word, tomateros, his sharpness, his by a single stroke, whereas it implied repeated blows, like hacking. More keen, yeah. Lucifer was talked about as being cunning. The devil is actually translated diablos, I think, into cunning. And there you go, sharpness and keenness. So it's going to be like more, I guess, another attack on him, as the older member that was occupying the female vehicle named T. That causes her to be carried away by the flood. Because now she's carried away by it. Okay, now, this word flood was actually translated to, comes from the word patamorphosis. Atos. Pater or atos. What a word, huh? It's interesting. It's from Potamos, like the Potamos River in New York, and a derivative of river born, overwhelmed by a stream, carried away of a flood. Okay? Or to have a burden. And there's that burden, and And when T actually sent us to have our visits with the vehicle's families and siblings and whoever else we felt was our most significant, the person that we were supposed to, our instruction was to plan to go to the person that had the most anxiety about our absence, and then have others that also feel that travel to that spot to see us. And that's what happened at my house. I went to my vehicle's parents' house. So, and I did that, we did that after T left her vehicle, we did it again. But, so T was carried away by the flood. Her vehicle, we're talking about. Was hacked away at by the flood. But the earth, in the next verse, Revelation 16, and the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. Now, how does that happen? Well, if she goes into the grave, then that flood that carried her away is going to be carried away. That flood is going to be carried away into the earth. And she actually went into her grave in White Rock Lake. Interesting, right? White Rock Lake in Dallas, Texas. It's almost downtown. This big lake. It's not a huge lake, but it's a big lake. And T and Doe rented a house right on the lake, I believe. I never went to that craft house, but some other students did, like Lagodi and June Odie went to it, and Jan Odie and Liv Odie went to it, because they were taking care of T. Well, Jan Odie and Liv Odie were taking care of T during the time that T was sick before she left her vehicle. And I didn't know she was sick during much of that time. Because we were in a house on Mockingbird Lane that wasn't but maybe a mile or a couple miles away from White Rock Lake at the time. And when it says that she was taken care of by two wings of a great eagle, it's interesting that another way of looking at this is that two of her stars, of those 12 stars that are in her crown, in Revelation 12:1, one of them was depicted. Well, two of them could have been depicted as having come to their next level, or could have been depicted as eagles, because of the way that they're depicted as the four living beings. One of the four living beings is depicted as an eagle. So, in Revelation chapter 4, I believe that's the case. Let me go back and look at it. Here it is, yeah, right here. And before the throne of sea of glass like unto crystal, in the midst of the throne, and round about the throne were four, this is Revelation 4:6, were four beasts full of eyes. And that beast here is actually translated as the Greek zoon, which means a living being, not an animal or a brute beast. Even though some of the translators put it that way as well. So it's saying that there's 4 of these individuals, and they're full of eyes before and behind, like the eyes of the Ezekiel, which was 4, which is depicted very much the same way here. And I think that's why they're linking it to that, to show that prophecy being the same individuals that are probably 4 aspiring archangels, aspiring to be archangels, I believe is what these individuals would be. And since they're living beings, they may already be members of the next level, even adults, or very close to adults. And they were graduating to their next position too. And I think those were 4 of the students that I suspect were Livodi, Janodi, Logodi, and Junodi. And I have a number of reasons for saying that. I'm not going to go through now, and I've talked about this before. But it says that in Revelation 4:7, and the first beast was like a lion, and the first living being was like a lion, and the second living being was like a calf, and the third living being had the face of a man, and the fourth living being like a flying eagle. And that Revelation 4:8, and the 4 living beings had each of them 6 wings about them. So wings in this context, I think, means a crew of a spacecraft of other crew members. So that each of them had 4 crew members, spacecrafts with a crew on them, and perhaps each of them was 6 members. 6, 12, 18, 24. The 24 elders. That they were in a sense, older members on that crew. Not older members in the context of older members of the next level. Like T and Do were older members, but T was Do's older member. But older members compared to those members in that crew, who were elder members. Which, they could have been older members also. Do even referred to the crew of 24 and the Beyond Human tape as older members at one point. Even though they could still fall away. Because Lucifer in that context would have been considered perhaps an older member on his crew. Especially if he was approximately the same, from the same litter of graduates on to T when he was going through his classroom experiences. Which is kind of the way that it seems like T and Do were thinking about it all along, which I already talked about illustrating with the bookstore experience that T said that was Lucifer. I said that in the previous video, if you didn't hear that. So definitely these two videos go together. So going back to Revelation, she was given 2 wings of a great eagle to fly into the wilderness, and the wilderness was again the mountains. The first wilderness was in Wyoming. The second wilderness, what I'm saying, was in the mountains above Denver. into a place where she's nourished. Okay, now this is where she is nourished, but they put the word she is there. Into her place where nourished times and half a time from the face of the serpent. So this nourishment is the nourishment she's giving to her litter, to her son and the student body. She's not, she doesn't need to be nourished. I mean, both are true, because at that point, her older member was giving her nourishment to give to the student body and to her and to Doe. And they were away from the face of the serpent, so that because the face of the serpent, the individuals that were looking to stop what was going on, to take their loved ones out of, even though they weren't necessarily acting maliciously. I'm not saying that they were the face of the serpent in their consciousness. But all the humans that are against anything about the next level become parts of the face of the serpent. So if you're sending an investigator out to try to find your loved one because you think they've been duped, then you're participating in the activity that is not next level activity to do that. If it was a next level member that was concerned about that loved one, they would, if they were next level, if they had a connection, a strong enough connection with the next level, which doesn't mean that they can't have a connection with the next level. I'm trying to be very careful here, because it was Junodi's vehicle's brother, I believe, that was a police officer that sent the investigator out to look for Junodi, that we learned about during Junodi's visit. And I'm not calling that individual the face of the serpent, but in terms of the way this all translates down to the human kingdom, all the humans, myself as well, are the face of the serpent when we're putting into effect things that are not things from the next level. When we're trying to pursue something that's not from the next level. And are things that we would have to overcome when we're doing human behaviors, and when we're teaching human behaviors. That's more of what we're talking about here. So that one individual wasn't doing that, I don't think. So he wasn't doing anything like, that was, the next level was gonna, I think, find a great deal of fault with him about. It's like, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It's like that individual didn't know what they were doing. They just were acting on, wanting to find Junodi's vehicle in order to reunite her with the parents. And maybe she was doing it for his parents, or maybe he was doing it for himself and his parents, or for other siblings or other family members. Maybe they were encouraging him to do it, So there's no fault on his part, as far as I'm concerned, which I'm not the judge of anyway, so it doesn't really matter what I think about that. But I'm just trying to show it as it kind of relates literally to what was taking place. That was happening ultimately to T. The reason when she went up there to that got that craft in Blackhawk, because it was actually in Texas that we found out that the investigator ended up being in Dallas and had some way of getting in touch with us. I don't know whether it was through a post office box, I think it was through a post office box, is my memory of it, that somehow had a name on it that the investigator found out was another student that that opened up that post office box that might have been Junodi. I don't know for sure. But I know T&Do would check with students before they would use a legal name from a student for some of those things that required identification. They would check with the student to see if there was anybody that they thought was looking for them. I mean, in fact, I didn't think anybody was looking for me, and so one time my name was put on a lease for the house in Boulder, Texas. Not Boulder, Texas, Boulder, Colorado. Not in Boulder, actually. It was in the Boulder Canyon. It was the house that was on Lost Angel Road, actually, up Boulder Canyon. You can actually look at that on a Google map. I think I did it one time. And it was an old, the house was built, part of the house, the garage was built actually over the shaft that was a mining shaft where they were mining for gold. But the main house was built next to that. And Doe actually had his quarters in that garage, which had an apartment above it that had a bathroom and everything. And that's where he lived for a while when we were in Boulder Canyon. That was after T left her vehicle. Not that long after T left her vehicle. That was like 1987. Might have even started in 86, living in that area. And a lot of things happened in there. That's where we started investigating going public again. That's where we started investigating going public as the return of Jesus and his students. That's where we ended up investigating the whole UFO phenomena. And that's where Doe brought us the book UFO Crash at Aztec. And may require reading of just the appendix part where it talked about the bodies that were dissected, the bodies that came from the crash at Aztec and maybe from the crash at the plains of San Augustine near Roswell. And that's where Mark and Sarah were instructed to leave the classroom because they weren't willing to abide by the instructions to apply the thinking and the words to "I could be wrong" lesson step. Mercotti didn't want to go through that. Didn't want to say that he was wrong when he knew that he was right, even though the things he was saying he knew he was right about could have sometimes been wrong. But it wasn't a matter of whether it was technically right or wrong. The question was whether he was willing to say "I could be wrong." It was like yielding to his older member's mind that he could actually see this totally wrong. And the lesson came from these tents that we had that were called leisure ports. And you can look up leisure ports on the web and you'll see it was a certain kind of tent that came down as a V, as the tip of the V in 4 places where you would stake it to the ground. And that the top of the V was connected with a canopy, and it had poles associated with that canopy. So it was held down by only 2 poles, and then in the canopy 4 stakes. And we made those you could make those into a corridor so that they were all connected, and you could, like a big long tent that was, again, away from the weather. But then you could also make them into tents to where it was all connected, like as if you were like on an Antarctic exhibition. No, exhibition. Maybe that is the right word for it. To where you were self-contained and out of the weather, and with everybody having their own quarters that were private in each of the tents. And you could also put like windows on those tents, so that, or doors on those tents, or just blank sides. And Tiendo bought a bunch of those. And so we had all our Coleman tents that were little, kind of maybe 10 by 10 tents. But you'd stand up in the middle if you weren't 6'5" like Lagodi was and Tall Lodi was. But you could stand up in the middle of it, and you could actually have two people in there, have privacy, and actually we would bathe together, whether we were male or female, in that tent by putting our blankets, hanging our blankets from a string that we would also use for drying things, because we would use a Coleman stove to heat up water to have our sponge bath in that tent, sponging or bathing over basins, wash basins, not those big round metal ones, those little, 1.5 foot by 1 foot kind of plastic wash basins that we would use to bathe in, by sponge bathing, and we would stand over a table to wash our hair with another basin or that same basin. And we would do it in such a way that all the dirty water accumulated into the basin. And then we just would throw that out when we were camping. And we always had water that we got from whatever water source was around there. We would haul in 5 and 6 gallon bigger containers. And we had many of those. We had probably 20 or 30 of those. So we would take a pickup truck or a van full of them to fill them all up at the same time. We would call it a water run that, 2 members of the crew would be assigned to make. Sometimes we'd go to a rest area and fill up, sometimes to a gas station and fill up, with an outdoor facility. Anyway, so that's getting into some of the nitty-gritties on the actual lifestyle and all that at the time. But when we went up to Blackhawk, that was like the most spiritual time period. So we weren't only lifted up into the elevation of getting away from the human vibrations that were more dense around the cities and the lower altitudes. We were also being lifted up where we started to have some meditations that were given to us. Meditating on the light coming through the top of our head and going through every cell, coming from the next level, going through every cell of our body, healing the body completely. And we wore robes for the first time when we were in Blackhawk. And we were only in Blackhawk for retreats for short periods of time, 2 nights each. Like 6 of us would go up. Interesting that it was 6 of us that went up. And those eagles had 6 wings. Huh. So those wings might have been 6 individuals of the living beings. But so 6 individuals could also have been 6 spacecrafts when they were operating in the next level environment. Because the next level, you don't have to be an adult member of the next level to have an infant body in the next level and to have tasks in the next level, elementary and maybe even more than that, and to be like an angel, to have a messenger task, and you don't have to be I don't know what it takes to be trained to drive one of those spacecrafts, but you don't technically even have to be trained to drive a spacecraft, because the next level can grow a physical body on a vine that's biological, that can be a spacecraft. And that a soul that's an adult member of the next level can have the task to have that body as their body, and then can have a lot of things that that body can do, that spacecraft body can do. And and so you could be 6 members, or you could be that soul that's given that body. And I don't know if it's an adult, if that's a fully adult member of the next level or not. Maybe it is. Maybe those 4 living beings were adult members of the next level. And because, you know, when the military do a crew, they have sergeants, you know, they have lieutenants that are actually in the field with people. And so it probably stands to reason that the next level, who do things very thoroughly and very all-encompassing, you know, very planned, but yet with flexibility built in, had different stations. Tindo talked about it as stations of growth. So just, you know, they would just use a word or two, and you can see how a word or two can open up a whole bunch of other things associated with another word or two. So they didn't have to give us a lot of information to be able to try to decipher some of this, if I'm doing a decent job at it. I'm not assuming that I am. But so she's carried away by the flood, and then in Revelation 12:16, and the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. Okay, so now we're still talking about the woman, so we're still talking about the vehicle that T took. Okay, because I mean, even though it's technically helping T as well. So since the woman really means the generator, as Jinome, to cause to be generated, the generator of the wife of her son. She's the generator of the wife. Generator of the vehicles of the wife. She's the one that seeded, that put all made the deposits of next level mind into the student body initially. Because remember, Jesus was given the 12 disciples. He didn't have those 12 disciples as his students before that. Well, I don't know. Maybe he was, but maybe it's a technicality. I don't know. But what he said is that they were his father's before they were his. And he said that in a number of places. I'm not going to go through those right now because I can't actually remember one of them. But the actual chapter and verse. Okay, so the earth is opening up her mouth Now that happens to be an expression of going into the grave. And I think it can be seen, that expression can be seen in the Old Testament. What I'm going to do is I'm going to search for that in my book over here. Earth opened her mouth. Because I think I wrote about the origin of it. And then I'm going to search here. And I come to this place where it says, the verse says, and the earth opened her mouth, where opened is from the Greek ana, which actually means again, and oigo, whereas a contraction, ana, has to do with the repetition and or intensity and or reversal in the opening. Huh. Repetition and or reversal in that opening. Huh, reversal in that opening. Earth opened her mouth, and the earth reversal of reverse opens. That's very interesting. That's both in that regard. Okay, but I'm going to provide a little background on the phrase, okay? In the three examples below, this has to do with someone literally dying physically. But before substantiating that idea with additional verses, the Greek definition of stoma has in its roots something being cut, as in cut down, that has to do with a mourning, beating the breast out of grief. That is what was associated with the lament in someone's death. Thus, this woman appears to be helped by death. The death of the physical body she incarnated into, that was taking the brunt of the beating, also known as persecution, from the beast, as she was essentially the mother scarab, pulling her young with her everywhere she went, into the wilderness and through the first stage of the overcoming process that her offspring, son, would take over and bring to harvest completion for each of their student body, which is depicted in verse 17. Wow. By the way, the picture of the scarab pulling her young came from Tiendo. They talked about that in San Antonio area when we were camping before we ever moved into houses. They said they were like the scarab beetle pulling their young. With that said, here and those scriptures that also depict this phrase as referring to someone's death, here it's clear that Cain slew his brother so that his brother Abel was not to be physically found. It's expressed that the earth opened her mouth because it was a human condition of jealousy, envy, and caused Cain to slay his brother, whose gift the Lord accepted, while Cain's gift was not. Cain had the biggest test and thus opportunity to grow, but gave into his human impulse to get even with his brother. Now, it didn't come from my mind that Cain had the bigger test and opportunity to grow, because Doe said that. T and Doe said that. They said that together in a meeting, that Cain had the bigger test. Now, I think that means that he needed the bigger test because of the ground that he had lost. Before that, whoever Cain was, actually, whatever soul was potentially being deposited into the vehicle named Cain. I don't know if it was a soul, but I can imagine that it would have been a soul. So anyway, so that was Genesis 4:8. I'm not going to go through that. 4, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Where it was 4:11 that actually says, "And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth and received thy brother's blood from thy hand." Then the next verse talks about it as, next we have a most interesting story from Moses. That appears to demonstrate that the literal ground opened up and swallowed up 150 people and their tent homes and all, which sounds like a very localized earthquake as others watched it happen. This is the literal earth opened her mouth. That's in Numbers chapter 16, verse 28. And the verse that actually talks about opening up the mouth is verse 30. That says, "But if the Lord make a new thing, and the earth open her mouth, and swallow them up, with all that appertain unto them, and they go down quick into the pit, then ye shall understand that these men have provoked the Lord." There were a bunch of Israelites that that hated Moses and wanted to kill Moses and wanted to evoke a rebellion. But when given the chance to leave and go away, they didn't want to do it. So they complained a lot, and they were troublemakers. And so the Lord gave them opportunities to change. And this was one of the opportunities where they were given an opportunity to change. And if I remember, now I forget what it was exactly, but because they didn't take him up on the opportunity, the Lord said that they were going to die. They were told ahead of time that they were going to die if they did a certain thing or if they did something. So it said. Then it said in Numbers 16:32, "And the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their houses, and all that the men that appertained unto Korah, and all their roots." Korah was the name of the individual that was kind of the leader of all that group. And they perished among the congregation. And all of Israel that were round about them fled at the cry of them, for they said, "Lest the earth swallow us up also." So it was a lesson for everybody that if you go against the Lord and against Moses, there's hell to pay, literally and physically. And then there was another depiction of that in Deuteronomy 11:6. So those are pretty good, direct quotes from the Old Testament. So I think we can assume that this is referring to the earth opening up the soul, for T here, as being that she's going into the grave. She's going to die what looks like a natural death, or some form of natural death. We're not going to know that it was caused by the next level, or caused by the flood from the Luciferians. It's going to be our faith that the next level knows what they're doing. So the student body were put to the test whether they were going to believe what Doe said, that she was burned out by dealing with the negativity from the flood of thoughts and negativity from those that were putting on the face of the Luciferians. Luciferians were motivating to attack, motivating to go against, motivating to be longing for, when they could be like some of the parents were, didn't send out investigators. My mother wanted to send out an investigator. My dad stopped her. Probably because my dad didn't want to pay for it, which, my dad was practical. But my dad also told her, I learned later from my brother and sister vehicle, that he was doing what he wanted to do. That's what I was told he said. And, I had already been moved out of the house for almost 6 years and living on the other side of the country on my own. I didn't have any support from them at all during those 6 years. So, and I had apartments in New York before I left, and I had a house I rented before I left, and I had jobs and a girlfriend, and I was living with her and all that. So I wasn't, like right out of the cradle, so to speak. I went to Canada. I lived in the wilderness and in the winter in Canada, in a facility with no facilities, actually, in a house that you could see through the walls. It was a log cabin, a little tiny one. We were okay, but it wasn't. We were eating out of cans sometimes because we had no money. We ran out of money. And then I got deported, and I had $50 left. And anyway, so, it's a long story, but I'm just trying to depict that, because so many people look at those individuals on the exit videos and they think, oh, those individuals they have no mind, they're like nothing. And yet the object was to become nothing in the human kingdom. So they had succeeded in doing that. The fact that they had no ego anymore. They had nothing they wanted to do in the world anymore. They had no selfness. They were selfless. Completely selfless. 100%. They were the true brides to the groom. They had given all their love to Doe. They weren't trying to save their vehicles. Or in a sense, I was trying to save my vehicle. Because I still had an ego. And I hadn't overcome my sensuality because I was deceitful about it. And I didn't even realize I was being deceitful, but I was. I wasn't letting that thought register that I was being deceitful. It's like, it was like on the sly. It's like, like a kid going into a candy store and, not really thinking about being a thief, but, seeing that chocolate bar there and grabbing it and sticking it in their pocket and then kind of walking out of the store. They're not really a thief, but they ignored whatever voice they had inside them that said that was bad to do. Maybe because that their parents taught them that was bad to do. They were just ignoring that. And that's what I did with sensuality. I didn't do it a lot. I didn't do it in a big way. I wasn't masturbating. I wasn't trying to imagine having sex with anybody. I wasn't, if I did have a sexual thought, I didn't continue it. All I did was have an attraction to looking down the blouse of a student or and then feeling the little rush that I would get from just seeing the bra, of that student. I got a rush from that. because I had been so doing a decent job before that, before that. That didn't happen right away. It was years in the making. But I remember being attracted when a female vehicle would bend down in front of me or near me, like they were tying their shoe or something. And they would bend down and I would be looking at their rear. And, I was attracted to that. Like, I would see it out of the corner of my eye or I'd look over to see them, Even though I didn't have any thoughts that associated with it, I didn't think about having sex with them. I didn't picture them naked. I didn't get an erection. But I was permissive of my eyes lingering for more than a few seconds before I turned my eyes away. So it's those little things. I watched this video of this general in the Marine Corps or something, or maybe the Navy, or maybe it was an admiral. I mean, he was a decorator. He had, his whole shirt was, and his hat were covered with, medals. And he was giving a speech, I don't know to who, maybe to a graduate class at Annapolis or something, I don't know. But it might have been also to a civilian group. It might have been a speech, I don't know. And what he was saying was that the biggest lesson that he had, advice that he had to give us, was to make our bed every morning. I was thinking, holy smokes, make our bed every morning. That's the best advice. He says, because if you can accomplish that every day, then you've accomplished something every day. And then you can add to it. And then you'll have an easier time adding to it and accomplishing something else, and accomplishing something else, and accomplishing something else. And before you know it, you'll be accomplishing a great deal. And at the time when I saw this video, I thought, that's ridiculous, making a bed. But then a little voice kind of, a little idea came into my head the next day, I think it was. And, or maybe it was hours later. And I thought, holy smokes, if I had followed every little procedure on how to conquer sexuality, then I would have conquered my sexuality. And that went for everything in the classroom. And Tiendo taught that the lessons were like a piano roll, and each note you were adding to that song. That's why they're the Revelation 14 song, the Revelation 4 song. That they are the song. So that's why Christians say that, Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father but through me. And it's through living our life exactly the way He was giving us to live that life, physically and mentally, that we are building our mind, we're filling our pocket with His mind. If we're not abiding by all His instructions that Jesus gave, if somebody wants to list them and say all the things He said not to do, or that He claimed people were hypocrites for doing, that's also following instructions. Like if you're a hypocrite because you pray, using many words so that it becomes a vain repetition, then you're not following what Jesus taught. If you pray out loud, you're not going into your closet and talking to the Lord in secret. You're praying out loud so people can see you pray. And they can think of you then as holy. And you can think of yourself as being holy for praying. Even though what you're supposed to be saying is talking to the Father, asking for the Father's will for us. And asking forgiveness for the things the mistakes we make in that will, when we see that will. And that will comes to us through our older members, from Jesus. That's the will that we're trying to follow. Or if the Father is with us, then through both T and Do's will for us, which is the same will for us. Because Do wants to do everything that his Father wills for him to do. And so we end up getting the chief's will, the chief of chiefs' will for us when we follow their will. Whether it's how we shave, the direction that we shave, however that comes about. But T and Do didn't sit around thinking about how to make all these procedures on which direction to run the blade over our beard when we were shaving. They didn't sit around trying to think up things like that. They only responded to things like that when somebody wrote a note or expressed a question, either asked Do how he shaved, what direction he went in, or there was a problem that somebody kept on chipping themselves or something, and so Do might have said that he found, it worked better to shave in in the down direction, I believe is what he said, as opposed to the up direction. Now, so when Arthodi maybe was one of the people that was asking that question, when Do gave that said that he shaves downward, now that became an instruction because it came from his mind. So that if you found fault with that and you didn't want to do that, now you were bucking the instruction. And you were not receiving his mind anymore by ignoring that instruction. So there were instructions that were given that I ignored, and I talked about them in the past, and not too long ago, if you want to go back and look at them, if it really means that much. But, to want to see it, because I don't want to keep on repeating it and taking all the time to do that over and over again. But there were instructions that I didn't follow, and I ignored, that had I followed them, I wouldn't have been in a situation to where I would have been vulnerable to giving into sensuality the way I did, and then hiding it the way I did, to where some of the mind that had been given to me was removed. So I lost some of the recognition, and I didn't even ask for help because of that. After that, I never asked for help after that. I still have trouble asking for help. I do ask for help now, but I still have trouble doing it sometimes. Because I still haven't regained that part of the mind that I lost in this vehicle. Jesus said that you'd be, that those that are given a lot are expected a lot of, and that if we don't use it, it gets taken away. Lucifer lost it, it was taken away from him. And now he doesn't even know that the next level exists. Or he thinks of them as just another space alien group. Or he may know that they exist, but he may think that, well, like I said, they're another space alien group that he can compete with. Because he's in competition with them. for souls. That's what the war is. So that pretty much takes you through. I might as well go through the last verse in Revelation 12. 12, what is it? 12:17. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. You know, they could have just said, right? Could have just said, which keep the commandments of God. Aren't the commandments of God also the testimony of Jesus? Well, maybe he's actually talking to all the souls that were in the Moses camp and were doing the best they could there, and then all the souls that were actually with Jesus. So were witness to, because testimony and witness is the same word. It's actually martyrdom. There's also, it comes from the Greek marturia, which comes from martus, which is by analogy a martyr, but a martyr is a record, is giving record to, witness to. It doesn't actually mean martyrdom, the way we think of it, but it's someone that's going to give report to, give the testimony to, show the evidence of. I'm doing that right now. I'm showing the evidence of how T and Do are the Father and Jesus returned. So I am giving my testimony because I have a first-hand witness testimony. So he's talking to all the individuals. The dragon is going after all those individuals that have, and there were, you know, there are potentially 144,000 of these that have that keep the commandments of God, and which can be or also have the testimony of Jesus. How many of those souls, took over vehicles during the time of Jesus, enough to believe in Jesus? That's all that was required to be saved at that time, was to believe in Jesus. But when you're believing in Jesus, you're believing in everything about Jesus. There's nothing about Jesus that you wouldn't believe in to be fully believing in Jesus. Even though doesn't mean that you're not going to have doubts about things, and there's certain things that you're not going to know why you believe in Jesus. In other words, he might say things that you might think, oh, really? In a sense, that's not fully believing in him, right? Like the thing about eunuchs. It's very hard for many people to believe in that could be something that could be from his mind as an option to do for a male vehicle. I think they are talking about only male vehicles in that context. But, I imagine if a female went through the procedure to become neutered in the same way, so she wouldn't have that those testosterone going through her, or the estrogen going through her veins that were making her long for having a baby, that may be the same kind of procedure. Because I think a woman feels to have a baby just as much as a male feels to be a father, to have a baby. That instinct is built into the genetic code of both genders. And so I suspect when a woman has a I guess what a hysterectomy is what it's called, or maybe a total hysterectomy, so they can't have any baby anymore. Perhaps at that point, they then have a different balance of estrogen in their body. And maybe that's why when they give them estrogen, they can kind of bring back some of their sexuality. The same thing that happens to a woman when they go through the end of their period, and some of them start to lose their sexual desire. I think it's the same kind of thing. But I don't know. Tiendo didn't talk about that in terms of a woman. But all they said was, all Do said was that it was more complicated for a woman to have the procedure than for a man. So for a male. So so that's why Do didn't talk about it in terms of having any of the females have a hesitancy of going through that procedure. They were probably in female vehicles because they had overcome that already. Or they were going to have to come back again to overcome it. Because once overcome doesn't necessarily mean totally overcome. Because like consistently overcoming it over time, and when different things happen and different problems happen and repeatedly happen, and when the next level is actually facing you with challenges to that, by even letting us see movies that showed, naked women and naked men, that can reaffirm kind of the challenge to it. It did for me. Not letting that become, like something that I dwell on, in my head. Or when I knew that scene was coming, which sometimes you can get a sense of, turning my head or telling my partner, tell me when it's over, so I don't see that. Or seeing it and then putting in the programming in my head that Do had in his consciousness that was natural for him, which was that those breasts were just like grapefruits, that stimulated that much sensuality to him as a grapefruit would. And it's interesting that when I see a breast that looks like a grapefruit inside, and usually that's the kind that were filled with silicone of some sort, my vehicle doesn't have any attraction to that breast. It's a natural female's breast that my vehicle is still has a attractive response to. But it doesn't always have that response. It has that response, after a period of time of not having that response. So, that's interesting that Do would use that as a grapefruit analogy, though. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making that, connection. Well, there's always going to be more to say, of course, Well, because the remnant of the seed also, we're talking about here. This was talking about before as the, because T left in 85, and that's when this would go into effect. And that's in 1987 when it started to go into effect. And that's and those who are the remaining of her seed, because remaining ones, the others. So she's not talking about the ones that had overcome in this verse, in this chapter before here, that are being talked about. They're talking about the others, which remain, the remnant, the residue, the rest. That's us now, they're talking about. And that's us now who are keeping the commandments of God. In other words, some of us were probably in that Moses camp, souls. And some of us were also had the testimony of Jesus, perhaps as the 70. or as the 500, or the 5,000. I think those are some of the numbers that were tossed around in the book of Acts. I don't remember a number beyond that. But, so that's who's talked about here, and Lucifer and the fallen angels hate those individuals, wroth with, angry with. And they want to do anything to turn our eyes away from the next level, away from tea and dough, away from Jesus' real teachings. So that's the war in Armageddon we're talking about. I mean, the war started with Michael, of course. The war in Armageddon started with Michael for the first wave. And you know how it's talked about, how they're talked about as the sea? Well, it's interesting that Doe talked about this as waves, first wave and the second wave, as the two raptures were the first wave and the second wave rapture, were in 1975 and 1994, were the two raptures. Which I'm saying that I believe the second rapture has more than one phase, which the first rapture did too. Because the first rapture had the phase of T and Doe, being with T and Doe, and then the phase of just being with Doe. You know, same individuals were that they came back. They left their lives a second time. Maybe that's the idea that came to me now, that was kind of a rapture for them again. Because some of them did leave family behind again. And some of them left jobs behind. Some of them had girlfriends they left behind. Like I'm talking about, like Steel Odie and Tall Odie, and who had he had a sports car, and he had a girlfriend when he was living in Dallas. When he left the group for a while, when he was living in the same area, vicinity where Bran Odie was. But Bran Odie was there on instructions, but he was there because he left the classroom to see if there was something more for him outside the classroom, and that he ended up hating, and then wanted to be back. And then when the Beyond Human tapes came out, and you got to see him, he wanted to come back again when it was offered, and it was, and so he did, and he was one of the 38. So the Luciferian space aliens aren't finished tricking people. And what we're going to see is, we talked about in Revelation 13, where those tricks are outlined as miracles and wonders, and starting with the beast, with the 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his 10 horns, the heads of blasphemy, the name of blasphemy, going against the next level. And I don't know if I'll do the next one I'll do, but maybe I've been wanting to get to chapter 13 for a long time, so I think I'll probably go there next. Good night.